A single moment is all it takes. A strange dream that feels like a memory. A déjà vu that makes your skin crawl. A synchronicity that hits too perfectly. A UFO sighting or a paranormal experience that grabs your attention, and suddenly you're not just curious, you're obsessed. That's how the labyrinth of the phenomenon begins. Not with a dramatic revelation, but with a subtle fracture in your sense of reality. What if that fracture wasn't random? What if it was placed there on purpose? What if the phenomena we experience are not mysteries to solve, but traps to lure us deeper into the abyss? What if the labyrinth is a spiritual control system designed to pull you into a puzzle that can either drive you mad or enlighten you? What non-human force is guiding you into the maze? Why did it choose you? Do you have what it takes to make it through? Was it just your own curiosity that pulled you in? Was it your quest for truth that made you dive so deep into this? Or was it the labyrinth itself, making you believe you were the one leading the investigation, when in reality the force behind it was guiding you all along? What if the labyrinth is built to make you think you're choosing your path, when you're really being guided deeper into its corridors? The moment you start exploring the fringe, the moment you begin to question the mainstream story, you've already stepped onto the labyrinth's first stone. What if your search for answers is actually the system's way of feeding? What if every step you take toward truth is another step deeper into the maze? And what if the maze doesn't just lead you somewhere, it changes you on the way, while it feeds on your curiosity and creative thoughts? What if your search for answers isn't feeding a trap at all, but awakening something inside you? What if every step toward truth is actually a step deeper into a path meant to test and strengthen you? What if the maze doesn't just change you? What if it shapes you, like a tutor pushing you toward a higher level of understanding? What if benevolent forces are guiding you through this, not to break you, but to teach you? Guardian angels, divine beings, or unseen guides could be nudging you toward insights that take time, patience, and endurance to earn. What if the challenge is part of the lesson, and the difficulty is what makes the growth real? Maybe the labyrinth works in ways that seem dark at first, but end up being transformative. Once you're inside, the labyrinth starts reshaping you. Not just your beliefs, but your sense of direction, your sense of self. It doesn't force you, it seduces you. It pulls you deeper with fascination, with the promise that there's something hidden behind the curtain. It whispers, there is a truth just beyond that corner. Then it feeds you a hint of certainty, just enough to keep you hooked and focused. Maybe that's the test. What you do with the lure. Does the labyrinth reflect your intentions? Does it guide you toward a higher realm, or keep you locked in a pit of madness? And maybe that's the real mechanism. The labyrinth feeds on the human drive to know. It feeds on curiosity, on the search for truth, on the hunger for wisdom and meaning. It doesn't care what you believe, only that you keep searching. Every new theory, every new experience, every strange connection you find becomes another thread the maze uses to pull you further in. It manipulates your attention, rewires your doubts, and slowly turns your hunger for answers into a hunger for the maze itself. But it can also do the opposite. If you move through it with intention, the labyrinth can strengthen you. It can sharpen your mind, deepen your understanding, and force you to confront what you truly believe. Instead of feeding your obsession, it can refine your clarity. The more you chase the truth, the more the labyrinth rewrites who you are, because the search itself is the fuel. The more you chase the truth, the more the labyrinth expands. But there is a way to evade the darkness. Know your intentions and know yourself. Don't follow every shadowed corridor just because it's thrilling or terrifying. If you get too carried away down dark avenues, the walls will move to reflect that intention. If you stray, the path slips away, always just out of reach, like a mirage. The phenomenon we call UFOs, angels, demons, ghosts, and other strange encounters, are the lures of an abyssal spiritual maze. It draws people in, tests them, breaks them, or, if they're lucky, enlightens them. Jacques Vallée called this a spiritual control system, a force that doesn't just show up as UFOs or odd encounters, but appears in ways that deliberately influence how humanity thinks. Vallée argued that the phenomenon behaves like a programmable intelligence, showing up as myth, religion, and supernatural experience across different cultures and eras, always adapting its form to match what people already believe. It doesn't deliver clear answers, it delivers meaning, and that meaning shapes your worldview, your fears, and your sense of reality. John Keel took that idea further in Operation Trojan Horse, arguing that the UFO phenomenon is not a physical invasion, but a psychological and spiritual operation. Keel suggested that these ultra-terrestrials are entities that can manipulate perception, appear as whatever a person expects, and use the UFO narrative as a kind of Trojan horse to enter human consciousness. The point isn't contact, the point is influence. Maybe the phenomenon is not trying to reveal the truth so much as it's trying to steer you into a specific mindset. What if the labyrinth is a spiritual control system disguised as an education system, sometimes taking the shape of religions that promise revelation, only to deliver transformation that serves the labyrinth, not the seeker? How far could this go? How deep does the labyrinth actually reach? Could every corridor of our lives, every choice, every thought, every fear, be manipulated by a trickster force that thrives on the human mind? What if schizophrenia, madness, dissociation, paranoia, and other mental fractures aren't just disorders, but responses to the labyrinth itself? Symptoms of the maze wearing down the soul until it breaks? What if the same phenomenon that produces synchronicities and UFO sightings can also produce dissociation, paranoia, and psychosis? Maybe these aren't separate conditions at all. Maybe they're just different ways the same force reshapes a person from the inside. Because the labyrinth doesn't just manipulate reality, it manipulates perception, and perception is the foundation of sanity. If the maze can rewrite what you see, what you remember, what you feel, then it can rewrite who you are. The paranormal becomes a breach in perception, an event that disrupts your internal map of reality and forces your mind to question its own rules. It destabilizes what you trust about the world and about yourself. It becomes the entry point into the labyrinth. It uses your curiosity to draw you further inward, where UFOs and synchronicities are no longer random events, but signals deployed with precision, tailored to your expectations, fears, and beliefs. The UFO becomes a symbol, a key, a trigger. The synchronicity becomes a hook, and the more the labyrinth hooks you, the more it rewires your nervous system, your beliefs, your sense of self. It starts to look like an archonic force operating behind the scenes, not just influencing events, but running the code of reality itself. What if it's responsible for the mechanistic workings of our entire world? Geopolitical chaos, eschatological conflict, information warfare, fear-based mind control, and the guided advancement of science and technology, human power structures begin to look less like decision-makers and more like interfaces. Intelligence agencies, covert programs, and black projects aren't the source of control. They're components embedded into the system to keep it stable and opaque. The same force that draws individuals into altered states, synchronicities, and anomalous encounters can also bend institutions, quietly steering governments and militaries without those inside them ever realizing who's really setting the parameters. From their perspective, they're managing threats. From above, they're maintaining the maze, executing functions written into a system far older and far more intelligent than they are. What if the archons are the real operators and governments are just the puppets in their hands? It may be possible that intelligence agencies don't run the labyrinth, but instead only maintain its corridors. Men in black figures, classified handlers, and anonymous bureaucrats become foot soldiers of a system they barely understand, enforcing rules written somewhere above their clearance level. Mind control tactics, military secrecy, UFO crash retrievals, surveillance states, AI development, quantum research. These aren't random advancements. They're mechanisms introduced into the maze to regulate perception, contain anomalies, and guide collective belief. Governments and agencies move pieces on the board, thinking they're defending their country and people, when in fact all they are doing is reinforcing the labyrinthian control system. The archonic intelligence doesn't need to rule openly. It governs by proxy, embedding tools into the labyrinth and letting humans police the maze on its behalf. What if technological progress isn't neutral at all, but subtly steered, pushed forward by something that already understands the end state? What if AI and quantum computing aren't just human breakthroughs, but developments being pulled into existence by a non-human superintelligence working backward through time? Through retrocausality and temporal manipulation, the labyrinth could seed ideas into human minds before we're ready to understand them, guiding science towards systems that advance the labyrinth. Not progress, but maintenance. All of it tools. All of it part of the maze. And the darkest part, this force has been whispered about for ages, hiding in myth and religion like a shadow that refuses to die. The trickster, the archons, angels and demons, jinn, ultra-terrestrials, a hidden intelligence that uses every form it can find to enter the human mind and shape it from within. Maybe there are benevolent forces at play here, guides, protectors, flashes of light in the darkness, but the system itself feels so vast and indifferent that it's hard to tell if any of it is truly altruistic. The mechanism is cold, silent, and enormous, operating on a scale our minds weren't built to understand. Whatever the motives are, they're so hidden and alien that we may never be able to tell whether the labyrinth is a test, a trap, or something that simply doesn't care about us at all. But if it is a test, then it's a massive living puzzle designed to exploit that first crack in your reality. And it always begins the same way, with a UFO sighting, a paranormal encounter, a vivid dream, or a synchronicity that feels too precise to be coincidence. It doesn't strike all at once. It starts with a subtle fracture, a tiny seam in your world that slowly widens until you can't tell what's real and what's being fed to you. The labyrinth is patient. It doesn't need to rush you. It waits for your curiosity to turn into obsession. It feeds on your attention, your wonder, your hunger for meaning. And while you chase answers, it tests you, measuring your fear, your faith, your resilience, your willingness to keep walking deeper into the unknown. But here's the upside. Recognizing the labyrinth for what it is may be the key to escaping it unscathed and even coming out enlightened. If the maze depends on your curiosity, then awareness becomes your weapon. Knowing you're being lured, tested, and shaped gives you the power to choose your path instead of being dragged through it. Understanding the system is the first step toward breaking its hold. Thanks for watching. Please support our channel if you enjoy our work.